Republicans in the House is 50. So you have an aging party that is so disconnected from what your average person wants. And, forget leftists and activists and progressives, et cetera. They're just so disconnected from everything. And they're still so scared of the whole idea of having political power, something that they really have never had since before Ronald Reagan was president. And they're just terrified. They were terrified in 2009, and they're going to be that way if Biden wins. And that's why, at this point, my number one concern just has to do with COVID. Ultimately, this election is probably going to be decided based on, it's Trump's fault for COVID, period. Kick him out, and that historically, that's been the case every time we've been hit by some kind of disaster, whether it's been a recession or a depression. Herbert Hoover, he was a one-term president. We put FDR in office. And so not to say that Biden is going to be FDR. They were saying that about Obama, and he pretty much bungled it. That's why one of his nicknames is the O'Bungler. And so I kind of just see that happening with Biden. But you know what? Right about now, COVID is my number one worry. And the fact that Trump's basically given up, and he never really even had it under control in the first place. Plus, he just never wanted to address it in the first place. It's kind of like, you know what? All right, you're sleeping on the job. Get out. Biden's older and, is literally 1 foot in the grave. But, he at least knows how to pass legislation, whereas Trump, Donald Trump doesn't know how to spell legislation. So
I believe it. And if you look at Kamala Harris, again, as someone who's from Oakland, East Oakland, and
Oakland correspondent Kenny Berry. What's the weather like, Kenny?
Kind of gloomy. Still on fire. Still looks like fire. Like some of those fire pictures, low key. Some of those fire pictures in Oakland Bay Area, I was like, these are like they're gonna be some SoundCloud rappers who have the dopest artwork for their albums now because of these damn fires. And I was like, that's probably the only good thing that came from that. Is like just, oh shit, it's all red. I don't even need to change the tint. But the fact that she claims Oakland, but she, like, people, there's a racial aspect to her that's totally fake. And then there's you just look at her actual policy. She's essentially just a darker skinned Hillary to a lot of people, in particular black people, because the whole Oscar Grant case is getting reopened because of how bad she botched it. Now, she didn't want to properly charge the dude who killed him. How she purposely kept people in prison after their sentences were over, just to fight fires for all those rich people's houses that went up in flames. As if, honestly, I give a shit. You look at the fact of just her whole time in politics, she has been literally one of the dirtiest players in the game. But when she first, and I actually voted for her, I'll admit it, because I was like, okay, cool. The person before, the incumbent, wasn't that great. So I was like, all right, she might make some change. Nope. And on top of that, she ran as an Indian woman. She decided to say, oh, I'm black, and I'm an AKA and all that other shit. And I'm like, most black people aren't in Greek organizations. So that really means nothing to it. Most people aren't in Greek organizations.
I was going to say, her saying that she was an AKA, that's like what?
Okay. Ryan was an Eagle Scout. I was a Cub Scout.
Like a percentage of the population because of the exclusivity and the fact that they're even more exclusive than how you say non-black Greek letter organizations. I don't know.
It's like, who cares? That exactly. Like, what does that have to do with you being a president? I don't give a shit what your fraternity is. I care about your policy. And her jacket is very bad. It's almost like, and then her wearing the Timbs, and I'm like, fam.
She needs a Kleenex. She always sounds like she's got a stuffy nose or a drippy nose, and like she's about to cry, and it's like,
or cackle, or evil cackle, because when she said, like, a black journalist asked her straight up, like, what part of your plan what would you do to specifically help black people? And she didn't even bring up her horrendous record with throwing a bunch of black people in jail in Oakland. Like, she didn't even, and then some of the laws, and it's not just race, like some of the weed laws and other laws that she put in place that screwed over a lot of people to get permits or whatever, or to kind of come up financially. She's done a lot as the top cop in California to ruin things for the average person. And people overlook it because they're like, oh, she's a different option. It's ethnic. And it's like, well, it's the Obama trick. Just because somebody's black or dark skinned and they look like they have the complexion, okay, well, now you minorities, quote unquote, or you non-white people should flock around this person that they didn't come from the soil. We didn't actually pick them. And that's why
with Kamala, it's kind of a reverse situation than it was with Barack Obama, because with
we knew nothing about
Barsack Okrumbo, he basically was like, I'm running on my own experience, my own demeanor, my own je ne sais quoi of being a politician, and running against one of the worst people in human history, Hillary Clinton. And so it was kind of like, yeah, of course he's going to win. He's younger. He's a great speaker. He energizes people in a way that like no Democrat has ever energized people. I'm not even going to include Bill Clinton because he was a rapist and a triangulator, and I'm not even going to touch him with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Whereas now, and to boot with Obama, he included Joe Biden. And unfortunately, the inclusion of Joe Biden on his ticket in 2008 was so older white people wouldn't feel so scared about a black president.
Yeah, because I got a guy who was endorsed by Strom Thurmond and Bull Connor.
Right. And so fast forward to now, and it's basically the Democratic Party realizing, oh shit, we have an image problem where we basically have nominated a bunch of people that are old and white. Joe, I think it would be smart if you had a person of color on the ticket. And so given that Kamala's name, at least, obviously we're in California, we're biased. We heard enough about Kamala in the last 4 years as it is. But out of all those names, whether it was Tammy Duckworth, Karen Bass, Kamala seemed to be the most reasonable given, well, she's already ran for president, which means if she already feels like she's up for it, even if she's not, which a lot of people have argued that she's not.
Didn't she not make the primary?
I don't know if that's true because Barack Obama was in the same position she was. He was a freshman senator. He'd only been in the U.S. Senate for 4 years. And all of a sudden everyone was like, oh, you're the next Kennedy. Oh, and so, it's just kind of like this pandering thing that the Democrats are doing. But also, let's face it, it's an age thing. And given Biden is so damn old, and there's a raging pandemic that's killing people of his age demographic, if you want to get somebody that's that enthusiastic about being in the White House, then, maybe she's the right person to go with. But, it's just a matter of kind of waiting and seeing. So
I just think it's dangerous, though. Like,
so I'm just wondering what happened to the bit about the show that you were supposed to answer.
Oh no, we're
I was gonna say we have Mars on Life guests that are like, okay, so what's this touchdowns and tangents that Ryan and Sebastian have talked so much about?
We're getting to that. Actually, we'll just get to that right now. So
I got some football beef to bring up with you guys that I think will lead to a pretty healthy debate. So, but yeah. Continue.
Might as well just send you the rundown. I actually didn't think about that. I probably should have just done that. But yes.
Producer Kenny strikes again.
Shut up! You showed up 5 minutes, bro. First off, Pete don't really want to talk.
Hey, we were on time for the first time in 3 weeks.
Pete's been late for the past 2.5 months, but I let that go.
Yeah, I wonder what's happened over those past 2.5 months.
Yeah, gee.
I was gonna start before that happened, but anyway, yeah, man. I think. With touchdowns and tangents, Pete and I played football in high school. Had the same exact number. Because I could give the whole shtick.
It just always cracks me up. Every time he tells the story, it always just cracks me up where he starts. Yeah. I always wondering, where is he going to start? Because I've heard this story 100 times, but I'm always like, okay,
it's always a different story every time, yeah. Because you realize where things are in the scheme of things. There's a bunch of stuff that happened that led us to having a conversation we should start our own podcast. But realistically, the synergy I guess that we're on is we both played football in high school. devout Raider fans, still pissed about the Tuck rule. Belichick could have been the Raiders head coach, and I probably would have became a Niners fan. Who knows what would happen? But the fact that we ended up in college, same school together, I have like a vast history of college football and like Boise State, and again, his cousin played at Boise State and is the Oregon Ducks defensive coordinator. Like, we just had so much football knowledge in common that, like, before we actually met each other, and we met through Andrew, shout out to Andrew, it was kind of just like a natural fit. Like, I showed up, he was doing a podcast called Football Friday. Really, it was just 2 episodes of him talking about the Raiders. Shout out to Shaka, wherever you at. And I came in, we started talking college football. Just, he's, trying to fill me out, see where my head was as far as sports knowledge and everything. And from that, we just both covered news and topics, and we talked about it. And it always kind of felt natural. And that same, like, synergy and just, like, common goals led us to eventually starting the podcast, because I wasn't in school. I was working my way back into school. He had graduated, but he was looking to kind of just do more than go to work and occasionally write some articles and all the other stuff he was doing. He's like, nah, like, let's create our own thing. And it started from there. There's honestly, like, if you could go back in time and record us, like, what we were doing before we started the podcast, it should be hilarious, because we were eating hood Chinese food and just talking shit. Like, honestly, our pre-show was funnier than the show most of the time. Like, our conversations beforehand were, like, the dopest. So the very foundation of Touchdowns and Tangents has kind of been that, like, our just natural chemistry.
All right, get to the next 2 years, 3 years, 4
Fam,
years.
I'm getting to
episodes.
that. I'm getting.
We're not even at the podcast yet, folks. We're not even at the podcast.
Actually, we kind of are. I was
It's
actually
like-
going to start on, like, past, like, the 75. I was getting to, like, upper hundreds. I was really just giving a
Dude,
broad.
I was gonna say our podcast genesis was like, hey, let's go out to eat. So I was thinking about starting a podcast, Seb. Oh, okay. I was thinking about you being the co-host. Oh, okay.
I mean, that's pretty much how this one started. But
Yeah.
in about 3 years, you'll have a whole
List of stories.
Archy of dots that you connected that weren't really connected, but
Wait,
they kind of make sense.
What the fuck word did you just say? That's not even
What's
a word.
Arky?
I'm about to say, he just made up a word and tried to bullshit his way through it. Like, I know you can't
All right, let's
spell,
just
bro.
move
That's
on.
ridiculous.
Let's just move on.
Yeah, so bottom line is, that's kind of where it started. And honestly, the core foundation of the show is like that we just roast each other mercilessly. Like, it's open.
And we talk about football.
And we talk about football.
and culture.
And we talk about life.
And we talk with
We're sitting here talking
interesting people like yourselves and journalists and football players and community leaders, entrepreneurs.
Coaches.
Essentially what the idea is, just to bring everything full circle, is, Kenny and I were just, he kind of touched on it. We're in the awkward changing stage of our lives, and we're just listening to these other football podcasts, and we're like, hey, the shit we were doing in college was actually better than this. Why don't we create our own show that's not white, that's not off base, that's not about the host, that's not about the interview,
All up in the videos.
but that's about the culture around football, that's around the context behind the news. Like, why the fuck are we talking about football? Why are we arguing about it so much? What does it even matter? Like, and so we wanted to create that platform where we could have those real candid conversations that you might have, at a barbershop, but on the air. And whether you're a football fan, a football nerd, someone who just casually strolls in the living room when the game is on and sits down, or, someone who just, will check a sports page every now and then, you feel included. You feel like, this is sports talk that I can actually understand, that's not talking over me. So really it's just about balancing the week's news, which I say is the touchdowns, along with, real life tangents that's happening with us, being men, overweight men living in Los Angeles.
He could have said, from the perspective of a black dude and a Mexican. Like, no, two overweight dude. Like, damn, are you trying to get a sitcom? I can write the segment. That sounds kind of dope.